Okay.
Why don't you just
All right. Welcome, everybody, to our Torah for today. Nice to have you with us, those who are in person on Zoom and those who are going to be watching us live stream or later on. And let's begin with our bracha for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. May our learning together be rich and meaningful, and may it inspire us. So last week, I mentioned to you that instead of using the text from the Degel Machane Ephraim, I wanted to focus a little bit on the month of Elul in preparation for Rosh Hashanah and Yom, to stick with that theme for the time being. We'll have time to go back to the Degel, but I said, let's do something that I think is equally important in terms of our own prep for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur during the month of Elul, while still holding on to the Torah portion for the week, this week, Ki Teitzei. So in that regard, I prepared a text sheet that I will share with you all right now. Sorry, hold on, let me just open up my screen with all of you so it's a little bit bigger. Okay, can you all see it? It says Lunch and Learn, Parshat Ki Teitzei. Okay, so I'm modeling this lesson on a lesson that I gained from Rabbi Aaron Smokler, who also happens to be part of the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. Rabbi Sam Feinsmith, who we've been studying, his Degel Machane Ephraim, is also part of the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. The Institute for Jewish Spirituality is something that is an organization that exists to push Jews. Originally, it was professional rabbis and cantors into more spiritual practice, Chassidut, meditation, mindful eating, silence, those kinds of things. Chazan Mimi and I both participated at various times in their 2-year program. But now they've opened it up to not just professionals, but congregants in general, any Jewish person who is interested in mindful practice. So if those of you here in this class are interested in more mindful practice, more study, more meditation, things like that, you should go on to the Institute for Jewish Spirituality website, because they offer a host of very, very interesting programs. Further, we are going to be offering, in the model of the way the Institute for Jewish Spirituality works, a contemplative minyan after the High Holy Days and Sukkot and Simchat Torah once a month on the South Campus from 11 to 12, which is going to incorporate meditation, movement, a little bit of study, and chanting. And so that will take place starting in October once a month, to be co-led, hopefully, by me and Chazan Mimi. But you will get information about that later on. And I'm thinking about people like Kathleen, who don't live anywhere near. Maybe there's a way that we could actually Zoom that, so that those who are interested, who can't be there in person, can still be part of it.
That'd be great.
Okay. So let's jump into our text that you can all see. I imagine you are all quite familiar with this prayer, Shema Kolenu. Shema Kolenu. Although Chazan Stein has a beautiful melody that's not that traditional melody, but don't ask me to sing it because I can't. But it is a centerpiece of the high holiday liturgy, Shema Kolenu. We first sing it and read it at Slichot services, and then it appears throughout the Yom Kippur day. And I'm guessing you're all fairly familiar with it. Hear our voice, Adonai our God, Shema Kolenu Adonai Aleinu, Chus v'rachem aleinu v'kabel v'rachamim ratzon et tfilatenu. Have compassion and accept our prayers. And then it says, Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva. Lead us back to you so that we can come back to you, God. Chadesh yameinu kukedem, renew our days as old. Al tashlichenu mefanecha v'ruach kodshecha al tikach mimenu. Do not cast us off in our old age. Do not forsake us. So, right, the gist of the prayer is that we want to return and connect back to God. So we started last week talking about this concept of tshuva, given that it's the month of Elul. In this prayer, what do you think tshuva might mean? What does it mean to return, lashuv, to return to God? And more importantly, it says in this prayer, we're asking God to lead us back to you. We're reaching out to God and say, and before I tell you what I think that means, what do you think it means? So those are the questions that I want you to, help me understand. What is the nature of returning to God? And why do we ask God to help us to return to God? George.
Okay, I'm guessing here. Well, teshuvah is returning to the commandments, to the religion. If you've strayed and you want to get on the right path again. So that's returning to where you should be. Okay, not to where you necessarily were. And, asking God's help, since it's believed everything's in God's hands, help us get there. Help us on the path, don't put stumbling blocks and all these other things which might cause us to veer from the path we're supposed to be taking.
Okay, so
something like that.
Good. So the classic definition of tshuva, as George said, is to come back to the traditional observance of mitzvot. But what happens if I know that I'm not going to observe mitzvot traditionally? Does that mean there's no place for tshuva in my life? In other words, is George's definition of tshuva the only definition of tshuva, or
I never said that.
No, you didn't.
You did
not. You gave us a
definition.
Full
thing, that's like getting 100 on a test. Maybe 90 is pretty good, or 80 is pretty good.
Okay, so in some way, come back to what the tradition expects of us in a moral, ethical, religious standpoint. Great. Kathleen.
I think sometimes it also means to come back with full awareness of what we've done and more sensitivity. A lot of times, like even something simple like having an argument with someone, you don't realize how much you've hurt them, or you're not as sensitive to what your behavior has brought about.
Hold on one second.
There's some stuff they brought here for you, or sorry, Robert.
No problem, George. Thank you. Sorry, Kathleen.
No problem. That we're not even aware fully of the extent to which we've hurt someone, or how we've hurt someone, or what are trespassing, even a commandment, how serious it is. We come to that sometimes later. We'll look back on our life and we'll say, "Oh, I didn't realize at the time how hurtful that was, but now I know." I think it's that coming back with greater sensitivity and awareness, and God has to lead us to that sometimes because we're not aware.
Very nice. Okay, so another possibility, as Kathleen says, is tshuva is recognizing where we may have not done the best that we could have done in a particular situation, and only upon reflection and mindfulness do we realize that we didn't achieve what we could have, that we were not our best selves, whether it is to ourselves, whether it's to another human being, whatever it might be. And a return is the opportunity to go back and repair whatever it is that we've done, and then do better the next time around. Great. Excellent. Marilyn, I think I saw your hand. You want to throw in a third possibility of what is-
Well, it's basically piggybacking on what they have had to say. It's the beginning of a new year, and being a beginning, it gives you the opportunity to know that you can do better, and that just because what you've done in the past and you're aware of it, mindfully aware of what you've done that needs repair and return, that God will forgive us mercifully and accept our prayers mercifully and willingly. And it's rather upbeat, it gives you hope.
That's nice. It's much easier for us to ask for forgiveness when we know we're going to be forgiven, right? It's hard for us to ask for forgiveness and seek a return when we know that the other person is absolutely closed to that possibility. So believing theologically that God is a forgiving God and a merciful God and wants us to come back, that actually makes the process of coming back that much easier, because we know that whatever we may have done will be let go of, will be forgiven. And, if not forgotten, hopefully by God, at least a clean slate. And there's great hopefulness to that. Great. Tell me more, all of you, about what do you think it means when it says, God leads the way, right? Lead us back to you, God. How do you understand that philosophically, theologically? What does it mean to have, to say, God, lead me back? Like, when you say that, what does that prayer mean to you? Like, do you expect there to be a hand that comes from the heavens to pick you up and to draw you back? Like, what does the metaphor mean for you, Rob?
I think it means that we are willing to take the first step toward God, but that we still need help. We can't take it all the way, that we're willing to meet you halfway. And if we take that first step, and God will help us along the way, but we can't just have him, like you say, plucked out of the air. It involves both of us.
That's really nice. So, Rob, your comment reminds me in many ways of 12-step programs, where in a 12-step program, there is an aspect of humility where I start the process, but then I know that I actually need help. I can't do this all by myself. I'm going to take the first step, but I'm going to give myself up to a higher authority, however I define that higher authority, to say, I've got somebody beyond, some power beyond me to get me the rest of the way there. Nice. I really like that. Other thoughts? Stan, and then Ziggy.
Well, certainly anytime that we talk about a God and a personal God, everyone has a personal God that may be more than one for that matter, depending upon the situation. If I, study Torah, the God that I'm looking at is the God of the Torah, but that's not the God that I come to in a more, let's say, spiritual sense or whatever. So for me, it means that I have to look at my life, and this is a particularly good day for me because I'm 93 years old today.
Oh, happy birthday. Wow.
Anyway, I can look at my life and the phases of my life and look back and understand who I was at what age and who I was at some other age, and see how blessed I am to have survived and accomplished what I have, and understand. But the God is the God that I'm no, I'm blessed to have within, as far as my own theology is concerned. I'm more a Rabbi Schulweis.
Nice. So it's not for Stan, and I think for many people, it's not an external power that draws us back. It's that internal compass that is the heart and core of our goodness, the desire for us to be authentic, good human beings is the godliness within us. And when we say this prayer, according to Stan, we are asking for a deeper connection to that inner sense of salvation and goodness that lies within to be activated externally. Nice. Stan, 93 years old, Kenahora. That is impressive, very impressive. And may you continue to be as sharp as you are now, as insightful as you are, Admea ve'esrim, until 120. Ziggy, what's your thought about?
So I'm looking at that statement, Hashivenu. To me, it's not so much lead us back as I look at it as bring us back, which is slightly nuanced. And the way I look at it is, we're talking about tshuva, and no matter how much we want to do tshuva, how can we really know that we really did it right, or we did it correctly, or we did completely? Because there's things we don't know. So here, the way I read it is, bring us back, even though we're not perfect, even though we probably did not do a perfect tshuva, but bring us back, and we will return to the best of our ability.
Nice, beautiful. So it's not about, as Ziggy reminds us, perfection. It's not about perfection, and God isn't looking for perfection, and we shouldn't be looking for perfection. And if we hold on to perfection, then the likelihood is we'll never return, because we'll never feel that we can get to that point where we're perfect enough. So bring us a little bit, and that is at least a start. What I also thought you were going to say, Ziggy, is, how do we know we're returning to what we should be returning to? And for me, that is this notion of God lead us back. For me, the God there is, how do I evaluate whether I'm turning in the right direction or not? And that's where God and the tradition and Torah and what God gives us stands. I know that I'm doing right when I can look at the words of God through the revelation, through our vast traditional literature, and behave according to what that tradition expects of me. Judy, you had your hand up, and then we're going to jump to our actual Parsha. Go ahead, Judy.
This just makes me think of all the Jews that only come to temple on the high holidays, and maybe it's another chance for them to start over and to come back, really come back.
So it's an invitation for those who normally don't feel very connected to the tradition to take that first step towards reacquainting themselves with who they are as Jews. Great. Okay. So you'll notice in the text that I chose, Deuteronomy 22, 1 through 4, we're talking not about our own tshuva, our own return, but the word that is here, Hashivenu Adonai Elecha. These words here, right, appear in our Torah portion right here. Hashev Tishivim. It's not exactly the same grammatical format, but it's the same language. It means the same thing. And here it's in the context of our responsibility towards returning a lost item, specifically somebody's lost ox or sheep. If you see your fellow's ox or sheep going astray, nidachim, do not ignore it. You must take it back. hashev tashivim, to your fellow. If your fellow does not live near you, or you do not know who he is, you shall bring it home, and it shall remain with you until your fellow claims it. Then you shall give it back to him. You shall do the same with his donkey. You shall do the same with his garment. So too shall you do with anything that your fellow loses and you find. You must not remain indifferent. If you see your fellow's donkey or ox fallen on the road, do not ignore it. You must help raise it. So just from a simple standpoint, pshat, what's the verse teaching us? What's it suggesting to us? Stan.
That we have a responsibility to those around us. It's not only to ourselves.
Good, exactly, right? Not only are we responsible for ourselves, but we actually have very specific responsibilities towards other people, and particularly other people's items and objects, their material possessions. Anita.
I'm the first section that we read was between me and God. This is between me and my fellow man. So what it does is it takes the teshuvah and says, not only do we need to return to our spirituality, but we also have to return lost items to our fellow.
Nice. So there's two categories that Anita reminds us when we think about our relationships, especially with mitzvot. There's mitzvot ben adam lemakom, our relationship between us and God, and mitzvot ben adam lechavero, between us and our fellow human beings. And when it comes to tshuva, that works on both planes, on both levels. And that is what Anita is emphasizing. Great. Other thoughts? Okay, then let's move a little bit further. So, Rabbi Aaron Smokler, who I told you is the source of the text, these laws known as Hashevat Avedah, returning lost objects, call on us to take responsibility for the possessions of other people, right? Similar to what Stan just said. The human instinct is to avoid lihitalem, to not see what is before us, to not view other people's stuff as having a claim on us. So 3 times over the Torah warns against this indifference and prescribes active involvement. Faced with a lost, wandering animal, return it to its rightful owner. Confronted by a faltering animal, return it to its feet. Other people's belongings belong in your consciousness and your sphere of concern. That's pretty powerful, isn't it? Like to think about a faith tradition such as ours that carries so much weight on our obligations to other people's material possessions. In fact, I think it was Rabbi Israel Salanter who said that my spiritual work is taking care of your physical well-being. So when I think about the kind of tshuva that I want to do, going back to that first paragraph, Hashivenu elecha v'nashuva, right? Return me to you, God. Maybe that return happens when I pay more attention to the needs of my fellow human beings. I return to God when I act in the manner in which God instructs me to behave towards other people. Right? Do you see that? Right? The mitzvah that's most important in this context is the mitzvah of being responsible to my fellow human beings. That's returning to God. Linda.
Yeah, I have a question. it says, if you see your fellow's donkey or ox, I don't know what the Hebrew word is here translated as fellows.
Yeah.
But I remember reading someplace that it goes further than
So
that.
here it is,
Yeah.
it's literally achicha, which means it's translated as your brother or your
Well,
sister.
I recall reading something much stronger saying if you see your enemy's donkey or ass or ox, you must help him raise it. To me, that really is could be very difficult. You see your brother or even, you know, a friend or a stranger, you might want to help, but being commanded to help your enemy, I think really says a lot.
In fact, Linda, you are so right that our tradition in a different place, in two different places, once in Exodus and later on in Deuteronomy, says exactly what you're saying, that it's from the perspective, it's easier when it's somebody who we relate to, somebody who we're related to, achicha. It's so much more difficult when it's somebody who we want nothing to do with. And that's where the tradition pushes us and challenges us to grow and invites us to say that maybe by doing this one kind act, by returning a lost item to my enemy, that may change the nature of my relationship with that person, and they'll no longer be an enemy. They will be a friend. And so in doing exactly what Linda is suggesting that we do, maybe that's the piece that talks about peace, P-E-A-C-E, because there will be no enemies if we all take care of those items, even to people who we are on the outs with, even to our enemies. Nice. Okay. One more paragraph that Rabbi Smokler suggests. To the Hasidic heir, there is much more that is adrift and off kilter in the world, and there are so many more types of lost objects that need finding. Before we jump to the text, what do you think she has in mind? To the Hasidic heir, when they read this text, where it's speaking about your fellow's donkey or ox or ass, it's limiting to the material things of our neighbors. But our Hasidic masters expand that. What do you think? Where do you think they're going to go with this? George.
Yeah, just a thought here. It's not material, but you know, Chabadniks try to get you to put on tefillin. In other words, just returning to where you're, quote, supposed to be. You know, you may not even be aware of it, but that's the goal here.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
A great example. So for a Chabadnik,
Yeah.
the person who's the thing that's lost is not necessarily their ox or their sheep, but the thing that's lost is their deep connection to their Jewish tradition in the realm of observance and mitzvot. And so for Chabadnik, exactly, it is getting a person to do a mitzvah. If it's a man, putting on tefillin. If it's a woman, lighting candles or making challah. That for Chabad is returning that person who was lost in their tradition back to their original source. Good example. Stan.
Well, one of the things that people lose is their self-confidence. And I can tell you that it's other people that if I get a chance to make them more confident in themselves, I'm really returning a you know, something that's more valuable than, and so that's my idea.
Beautiful, beautiful, right? What is our obligation to see a person who is emotionally, spiritually suffering, not physically lost something, but lost some sense of self, selfhood, self-importance? And do we have a responsibility? Right, if I'm a trained, licensed therapist, yes, I have a responsibility. If I am a trained and licensed doctor, I have a responsibility to returning somebody to health, physical health, emotional health, mental health. But if I'm not a trained therapist, if I'm not a trained doctor, Stan is suggesting we still have a role to play in being a source of strength to those who are missing something, who are in need. Right? Our fellow human beings walk paths that are oftentimes strewn with brokenness. And what role can we play in helping them on that path to healing? Right? That's Stan's suggestion. And in fact, Stan, that's exactly what we're going to see here in this passage from Rabbi Yaakov Yosef of Planoy, who was one of the earliest students of the Baal Shem Tov. And he says, do not ignore it. You will want to ignore it or them as if you do not have any relationship to it or them. Return them you must. It was not for nothing that they came into your awareness. Literally, they were shown to you. You have a stake in the matter. Hashev, do your own tshuva first for wanting to avoid them, and then tashivem, return them in tshuva, back into the circle of your life and your community. The verse states you must help him raise it, but Rabbi Yaakov Yosef reads this to mean you shall be raised along with it. When the great ones of Israel bind themselves to the rest of the generation, even the lowly ones, then they themselves are elevated. So he's saying two very distinct things. In the first paragraph, what is he saying? He sees that the doubling of the verb in our original verse in the Torah, hashev tashivem, means that the first hashev is to you. You, me, each one of us has to be aware of our responsibility towards another person, because we have a tendency to close our eyes to humanity's suffering. So don't close your eyes. You need to return to that, as Ziggy said, that, or as Stan said, I don't know, I think it was Stan, that inner source of godliness within, so that you know that you can help another human being. And then the second verb is to actually do that help, whatever it is they need. George.
Yeah, just a comment here. I'm not a great expert on grammar. However, that form of a verb, let me look at my book here, where it has, yeah, where it has the absolute infinitive, which that is for the hifil, and then the verb, the future, it means you shall surely, emphasizing. So we got, it's an emphasis thing, typically, you really will, and then do whatever it says afterwards.
Correct. So what George is pointing out is that in when we read the Torah and we find a verb that is doubled, the absolute infinitive, it is traditionally understood as showing greater emphasis.
Yeah.
That the Torah is saying you must do this, whatever this is. For the Hasidic rabbis and for the sages of the Talmud, for them, while they knew that understanding of the Torah, they doubled down on it. And in this case, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef isn't reading it that way, George. Okay. What he's saying is the doubling has nothing to do with emphasis, but actually is the command first to the individual to turn inward and ask themselves, why do I have a tendency to ignore those around me? And then once I'm aware of my responsibility, to actually act in a manner that shows that responsibility.
May I comment on that?
Yeah.
Because the male singular command is the same as the absolute infinitive here. So it could be read that way, even by the grammar thing.
Sure. Great.
Here's the command, do this, and then the other part.
Thank you.
Marilyn. Here's the grammar book, so it helps.
This is the basis of the practice of Musar, isn't it? I mean,
There's a very famous student of Rabbi Israel Salanter's. Rabbi Israel Salanter was probably the founder of the modern Musar movement in the Lithuania yeshivas. And he had a student, Rabbi Simcha Zissel of Kelm. And Rabbi Simcha Zissel of Kelm, who was Rabbi Salanter's student, used this verse to base his understanding of Musar on. So Marilyn, you're absolutely correct. One of Rabbi Salanter's students used this verse to write an entire treatise on how we should live moral and ethical lives.
and I don't have I think it was further up. There was a sentence that said about where it's other people's belongings belong in your consciousness and your sphere of concern. It doesn't say your possession. That you don't own the other people's stuff. And so that can be part of the Musar tradition too.
Nice, right? Other people's belongings belong in our consciousness. In other words, we have to be fully aware of how our fellow human beings walk in this world. That is our responsibility and obligation. Great. Okay, let's continue. So Rabbi Smokler jumps in. The community is only whole when it makes space for the broken. Individuals can only stand proud when they help others stand erect. One who raises others is themselves raised up. So she's commenting on the second passage that Rabbi Yaakov Yosef reads. When it says in the verse here, right? If you see your fellow's donkey or ox fallen on the road, do not ignore it. You help him raise it. And Rabbi Yaakov Yosef is suggesting that what does that mean? That means that when we raise somebody who is suffering, we ourselves are raised and the community is raised. Yeah. So how do we do that? Give me an example. Like think about in your own lives, in the lives of our synagogue. What are the moments where we might see somebody's ox or donkey fallen that we can raise up? Right, we're speaking metaphorically here. We're not speaking, physically, practically. So I saw Nancy and then Ziggy.
I'm not sure this is what it means, but if somebody's ill or has a problem or an accident and they have trouble moving or walking and you help them out, whether it be groceries or whatever. I mean, you're raising your self-awareness, you're lifting yourself up when you do a good deed for somebody else.
Right. That's a perfect example. And I believe our synagogue, if it doesn't currently have, hopefully it will have soon, a Bikur Cholim committee. We have a community of caring committee. And that community of caring committee does exactly what Nancy's suggesting, right? When somebody has fallen, whether through an illness or through a loss of a loved one, right? We're here, that committee is here to lift them up through a care package, through a challah, through a note of concern. And that's exactly what we're doing. Great example. Ziggy.
So that was what I was going to mention. Also, Shiva service, also driving people to the doctor that are not able to drive themselves, that kind of stuff. So that's within our own community. And then, of course, if you are able to feed the hungry outside of our community, of course, if there's hungry in our community, that's one thing. But if they're not, and you are able to feed the hungry outside our community, that's also another point.
Good, great examples. In other words, anytime we do a gemilut chasadim type of mitzvah, an act of loving kindness, to somebody in need, whatever that need is, whether they're in our community or by extension, they're in our larger community, even if they're not in our immediate community, we still can't ignore them. We still have a responsibility to them. Great. Anita.
It has become a tradition with us that if somebody is standing alone to do mourner's Kaddish, to go stand next to them. I know that when I lost both my husband and my father, just having another human being standing next to me was very uplifting.
What another great example of fulfilling this mitzvah, indeed. In fact, I think it's really one of the beautiful things that I have learned from Temple Aliyah, to be able to do that. Thank you for that. Okay, let's keep going. So now comes the Sfat Emet, who is a much later commentary, but he knew the Baal Shem Tov, he knew Rabbi Yaakov Yosef, and so he's going to incorporate their lessons into a much more modern day lesson. And he says, regarding the verse, if you see your fellow Israelites, ox or sheep gone astray, do not ignore it. You must take it back, hashev tashivem, to your peer. This can be explained thus. When a person habituates oneself such that one cannot ignore one's friend's loss, or a friend who is lost, right? That's the example of Chabad. Whether it be a physical or a spiritual loss, then one can truly return to the friend that which was missing and elevate it. All the more so with a person themselves. When one becomes adept at noticing what is lost, one cannot tolerate losses within oneself. Then one may truly be redeemed. Right? I just find this to be a really beautiful passage. What does it take for you, for each one of us, to habituate ourselves to not ignore a friend's loss? How do we have the capacity to be able to notice what a person is missing? George?
Well, sometimes you don't even have to know the person or notice anything. Example, I've been called to with Chabad a few times where somebody died, had no money, and they sponsored the burial, but they wanted 10, and they want men, that's rules. So I was called to go downtown to a minyan, East LA with a bunch of other people, and that somebody I've never even heard of, but you're still doing this favor.
Good. It's a good example. Other thoughts? Yeah, Rob.
When someone is suffering a loss that you yourself have experienced, you feel a sense of empathy for them.
Okay, so good. So, our ability to connect with other people oftentimes is related to the ability to stand in their shoes. We can never really stand in another person's shoes, but it helps us to do that because that's what leads to greater empathy and compassion. Excellent. Other thoughts? Yeah, Marilyn.
You have to be mindful of what's going on around you and to other people. You have to be present in order to be able to be empathetic. I mean, unless you're not able to be empathetic and have no conscience, but you have to be tuned in.
Today, what gets in the way of our ability to be tuned into other people and to things that are going on around us?
The distractions of the internet, everything, politics, the telephone.
Do you ever notice, are you ever out and about where you notice that people are constantly looking at their phone and not looking at anything that goes on around them so that they can be, missing, as Marilyn suggests, people who are in need? people who have needs that we're not paying attention to. Right? So to be mindful, to notice, to look, to take our eyes out of our screens and just look at the face of a fellow human being may be the act of practicing, right? Not ignoring our fellow human being. Anita.
The recognition that the younger generation is so much tied to the cell phones and internet. My son is part of the D.D. Hirsch suicide prevention. He works for D.D. Hirsch. And they have established an online, you can call in if you're getting to a point where you're thinking of suicide.
Hmm.
They also now have an online chat feature where people can get online with somebody and work through the process of not doing the suicide they're thinking of. And so we can use that which has caused us some separation to also bring back people who are desperate.
Yeah, that's beautiful that your son does that. And sometimes a person habituating oneself to not ignore one's friend's loss may not be in direct contact, as Anita is, offering in her example, but just being present in some other way, whether it is manning a suicide hotline or showing up to be part of a minion, or, I was called for this past Sunday to participate in a tahara, in a ritual washing. Right, no connection to the deceased or to the family for that matter, but being present in a way to somebody else's loss, right? So that we can do what's necessary to lift up and elevate our community in those actions. Stan.
Well, I think when you said community, that's a sense that we're talking about, to have this sense of community, whether it's our congregational community, other Jewish communities, other communities in our lives, to have that feeling of connectedness. And, I strongly feel that main purpose of congregation is not ritual, but community.
So, it's interesting that you say that, Stan, because there are all these studies that show that across American society, people are participating less and less in church, synagogue, and mosque. And we are living in a society where we are more divided and more alone. And it is, as Stan said, communal connection through belonging to synagogue or church or mosque that puts us into the context of other people so that we can learn about people who are not like us and therefore have more ability to be able to elevate and raise ourselves and them up through our responsibilities towards them. And unfortunately, Stan, as you said, people are belonging less and less, and fewer people feel that sense of responsibility, because what does it mean to belong to a community? It means to take seriously the responsibility that comes with that membership, that I have an obligation to my fellow members. But when I don't belong, I can turn the other way and ignore it. For sure. Last text by Rabbi Smokler. Taking account of others who are adrift is a practice. One must habituate oneself to this, averse as we naturally are to seeing what we would rather not see, whether it be physical infirmity, or spiritual deficiency. Also, it is hard to be keenly conscious of absence, of who or what is missing. We need to actively cultivate an ability to truly see other people with all of their wholes and to see who, what is missing from the whole. Then, says the Sfat Emet, we might be able to truly see ourselves. When we are willing to notice and compassionately join in other people's fallibility, we will learn to recognize all that is amiss within. The apex of Hashivat Avedah, then, the cultivated practice of returning that which has gone astray, is when we can stop ignoring that which has come undone within ourselves and begin to repair it. Hashev Teshivem, says the verse, return to yourself. What do you think of this? And how might our synagogue play a role in making this happen more frequently? I'm thinking of one thing. There are times when I walk into synagogue and I see people who know each other connecting to one another. And there's great joy and laughter and celebration in the fact that people who know each other can have that time together. And then I oftentimes see people who don't know anybody, who sit by themselves and are looking for connection, but don't know how to take that first step. They're lost. They don't feel the friendships that they would like to establish, and they don't know how to make it happen. And I wonder if this passage here is reminding us that while it is true, we want to make sure that we come to a community where we can be with the people who we love being with and celebrate together and laugh together. We also cannot forget but to have not tunnel vision, but a wide scan of a space and bring those who are not into that inner circle, to make them feel welcomed, to make them feel part of, to make them feel like they are belonging. And another example that comes to mind is if I am a congregant, let's say, who is trying something new for the first time, like let's say I've never read Torah in my life and I want to read Torah and I practice and I learn Torah. In me reading Torah for the first time, might that not motivate other people to do something that they have not ever done before, especially if I don't do it with perfection, but I get up there nevertheless. And then I'm held by the community to say, wow, look what you did. And that might encourage other people to step forward in the same way. So to be keenly conscious of absence or who or what is missing is for us to say, what can I do? How can I contribute to a feeling of community collective, of togetherness, of participation, and be very, very concrete and specific whenever I walk into this place for how my presence here can contribute to somebody else here feeling more whole and complete. So they don't leave ever saying, this is not a place that I feel connected to. Rob.
This is a difficult question, but there's a saying, and I forgot who the quotation is attributed to, that hell is other people. And as an introvert, I relate to this. I saw a question on the website Quora the other day where someone asked, what do you find you need less and less of as you get older? And the answer that 90% of the people came up with was other people. I avoid other people. I don't want to be around other people. And I'm so much happier. How do we avoid that, especially those of us who are not particularly people persons. How do we, I felt bad reading it, yet I understood it. Can you?
Yeah.
We're near
That's
the
a-
end here, and that's a tough question to ask at this.
No, it's a super question and a really important one. I do believe, Rob, that many of the mitzvot that exist are there to help us find ways to get out of what we would normally stay in our comfort zone. I'll give you one example. In order for somebody to say Kaddish, there has to be 10 people in the room, 9 other people in the room. If there are not 9 other people in the room, that person can't say Kaddish. So if I prefer, Rob, to be by myself, and I could just as easily wake up in the morning, put on my tefillin, daven, and have a very spiritual and meaningful experience on my own, and not be distracted by any noise or anything else. But if I hold seriously that idea of minyan, then that pushes me and challenges me to say, I have to get out of my comfort zone. I have to leave my home and force myself to come to a place where I know, even if I don't want to talk to somebody, my mere presence of being there makes a difference. Right? And I may go there and not talk to anybody, but it doesn't matter because I'm there. And my being there is key to somebody else's ability to do something that they need to do. I think we have to hold on to those things, Rob, and put ourselves in positions that, obligatory positions that get us out of the tendency to run away. Because when we're all alone, like what I think those people were saying on Quora is, I'm tired of having to be responsible to anybody else. It's enough for me to be responsible to myself. And that, unfortunately, is a tendency in America. And what we need to come back to, what we need to push in our society is the sense of no, right? We are a communitarian country, and we've lost that. And how do we regain it? We regain it by every individual saying when they least feel like they need to show up, that they show up. But I think you're 100% right in your question, that is a tendency of a lot of people. And that's why we have these passages here to remind us, to push us, and to challenge us to move beyond our comfort zone to doing not what we feel like doing, but what we know is the right thing to do. So.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, a good week ahead. I think next week you're back with Rabbi Vogel for the next couple of weeks. I look forward to coming back and teaching Lunch and Learn when it is back on my schedule. And
plug a
hopefully
couple of things.
I will
Thank you.
see you all in shul soon.
May I plug a couple of things, Rabbi?
And happy birthday, Stan.
Yeah, Stan, happy birthday. Oh,
Yeah.
May
All
I
right,
plug a couple of things, Rabbi?
you want me to stay on for a minute?
No. I'd like to plug a couple of activities.
Yeah.
So this Shabbos at Kiddush, we will be making sack lunches for the first time in a long time. We kept postponing it. Finally, we decided, okay, no more postponing it. So that's going to be this Shabbos. And Sunday, we're having the community picnic from 11 till 2. It should be an amazing event, but we still need some more volunteers. So to make it even greater, anyone that can volunteer and help will be greatly appreciated.
Thank you for those announcements, important ones.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. See you hopefully at Sunday at our community picnic, if not before.